Candidates, you ready for filming?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Rob Park. I'm the returning officer. I'm chairing the hustings. On the top table up here, to my right is Steve Harwood, who's Senior Manager of ULU. To my left, past the candidate, is Julie Adams, who's the General Manager of ULU. And at the end of the table is the current London Student Editor. Joe is on the table because he's one of the only people not re-standing for election. That's the current team. Any questions submitted in writing should come to this table first. The attention of Julie, she will look after them and then pass them to me. If you'd like to do a question from the floor, put your hand up and I will come to you. When you've asked your question, I will then turn around to the candidate or candidates and say that you can answer that question, and they will. Okay, the first candidate speaking is Vraj. Vraj has sent his apologies to the hustings today. He sent me an email and he's asked me to read out a statement on his behalf. Statement on behalf of Vratislav Vraj Dominik. I'm Vratislav Vraj Dominik, and I'm running for ULU President. After spending 1 year as Vice President of Student Activities and 8 months as President of Queen Mary Students' Union, I have developed a real understanding of how a students' union should work. As ULU President, I will restore ULU to the prestigious and respected institution it once was, and a place where all students can feel included and represented. Be the voice for all students, not just the already vocal minority. Make ULU the centre of development and training for London unions, run regular training sessions to ensure that all London Students' Union officers are equipped with the skills needed to carry out their roles effectively. Carry out mass student consultation, including but not limited to surveys and focus groups, to find out what you want from your union. Ensure small and specialist colleges have access to ULU resources. Campaign against fees and cuts, but in a way that all students can support and participate in. Campaign on issues that will affect the everyday lives of students, such as transport, housing and living costs. I will also campaign for international students on the changes being made to student visas. To advocate and campaign for widening participation, ensuring education is what it should be, a tool for social mobility. Make ULU a centre of excellence, attracting the world's leading minds for lectures and workshops. Ensure ULU is a pillar for the community, working closely with London citizens and similar organisations to fight for causes such as the London Living Wage and community land trusts. Provide a multi-purpose social and study base in ULU to ensure the building becomes a regular place for students to come and work, socialise, network and have fun. Make ULU transparent and accessible, making sure meetings such as the Senate are widely publicised and well attended by everyday students, as well as union officers, and make sure the process by which important decisions are made is transparent and viewable online. Make ULU the social hub for students in London, organising a wide variety of events and taking advantage of the brilliant facilities ULU has. Be an approachable president, holding weekly drop-in sessions where students can question me about policies and decision, to lobby bucks to allow less popular sports to play in leagues and loosen their regulations to allow teams from larger institutions to recruit from small and specialist colleges. So vote Vratislav Vraj Dominik, number 1, ULU President. That was Vraj. And the next candidate is... Sorry?
Did you video that? And I got the recording, it's the video from that one, yeah.
The next... After this next candidate, after all the candidates have spoken, the next candidate is Claire Solomon. Claire.
Okay, so just before I start, I'm Claire Solomon, SOAS student, study of religion, and current president of the University of London Union, re-standing for second term. So, I'm Claire Solomon, standing on a record for a campaigning democratic union for London, not breaking manifesto pledges, unlike the clegs of this world, and standing as a fearless campaigner in very hostile times. I've stood up for students where others have condemned them, and I've stood up against the government and paxmen, and I've stood up to management when they tell us to cut. Last week, I had a cup of tea with our Vice-Chancellor, at which we spoke about the closing of the entire School of Advanced Studies. He says he categorically won't go against Universities UK, the UUK that accepts 100% cuts that would decimate Goldsmiths and Paris Institute and Courtauld and Heathrow, and that accepts fees that will prevent all but the richest from bettering their lives. We have to ask, what sort of education do we want? One where people only go to uni to get a well-paid job? What about nurses and teachers and people who want to give art lessons to disabled people? What about wanting to expand the mind and contribute to society? Well, I say no. I say not one more cut, not one, not now, not ever. And I pledge right here, right now, that I won't be sitting down for one more cup of tea with our Vice-Chancellor unless he changes his position. So let's talk about tactics. Rather than cozying to management with cups of tea, my job as President is to take a lead. I don't need to spend time and money on useless surveys, which we all know are open to manipulation. Last year, 50,000 students were on the streets of London, all voted with their feet against cuts and fees. I know the issues that will affect students. I know that the cuts will affect all students. I know that women, LGBT, small and specialist, the arts and humanities will suffer the most from cuts. And I will take a side on all these issues. I will work with anybody that's against cuts, and I will work with anybody who's against racism and homophobia and so on. So now let's look at what really works. I've lobbied, I've emailed, I've taken the gloss off Nick Clegg's sham consultation using non-violent direct action by writing hands off on my palm. I've protested, I've occupied, and yes, I went inside Millbank along with thousands of students angry at what this government are doing to our education. And now the whole world is talking about us. Did this happen because of cups of tea? Did the LGBT movement begin because of lobbying? Did Mubarak fall because of letter writing? No. Major changes only happen when millions of people take to the streets. And we need to do this again on March the 26th, marching with disabled people and unemployed people, with trade unionists and pensioners. And we need to continue organising mass campaigns. We need to take a side, and we need to be politically principled. I do not want university to be a place where women feel unconfident, or where black and minority students do have to face fascists on campus. And by doing this, we will not only increase our turnover, but we'll have a student body that is confident to argue against the cuts and fees, and that understands what education is for. This year, I've proven that ULU is more than just a gym. Vote Claire Solomon #1 ULU President for a confident, campaigning and committed union.
Okay, you've heard from both candidates. The first candidate to speak through me was Vraj. He submitted a statement. And the second candidate is Claire Solomon. It's now time for questions. I'd like to take a round of 3 questions. Obviously, because Vraj isn't here, I'm going to have to determine whether he can actually answer a question or not, because questions must be answerable by all candidates fairly. So, would you like to do oral question from the floor or a written question which can be anonymised? Question at the back. Please stand
written
up.
questions, I would say.
Written questions.
Do you want to write it down?
It wasn't a survey asking what was better. Do you have a question?
We've got a question at the front here. Please speak quite
So
loud.
UCU have just balloted for strike and action short of strike. An overwhelming majority of people voted for action short of strike. Obviously, action short of strike represents quite a few problems for student unions, as it often involves using students and their education against them to get what they want out of the management. What will you be doing? Would you support the UCU strike, and what would you be doing to make sure that it doesn't detrimentally affect the students you represent?
I thought you wanted to say 3.
Yeah, we can do that one. Third question. Second question. There was a hand up here. Yep.
Well, one of the candidates suggested that they want to, this is for both candidates, one of the candidates suggested they want to turn ULU back to being a respected institution, but my own impression, the impression of many others, is that ULU has never had a higher profile or been more relevant to any number of students. What would the candidates want to do to build on the good work that's been done this year over the next?
Okay. Third question.
Where do you see ULU in 5 years' time?
Okay, for the purposes of the record, I believe that Raj will be able to answer all of those questions, and they will be fed to him. Claire.
With regards to the UCU ballot, I absolutely support trade unions, UCU, Unison and other trade unions. If they make a democratic decision to take action, then we will back it in the same way as they back us on all our actions. I do not believe that a day or 2 days or 3 days of strike or assessment boycott is going to detriment the students. Right now, it's a long-term strategy. Our education is going to be smashed if these lecturers do not win their fights. The second question was about ULU's reputation. Well, I mean, from the thousands and thousands of emails and handwritten letters and postcards that we've received this year after our protests on the streets, I can tell you that the majority of those people now think, one, that the students are brave and inspiring, that there's hope for the future, and that ULU is something that does represent more students than the 454 people that voted a couple of years ago. This year, I guarantee that the turnover is going to be increased, the turnout to election is going to be increased massively. We already have 17 people standing for the positions, 7 for student trustee, where last year only 2 stood. This is clearly going to make it more democratic, more accountable. I'm also going to continue with the London Student Assembly, which is something that we initiated this year, at which up to 200 students have turned up to discuss and debate various issues, including stewarding demos and legal briefings and that sort of thing. We will continue with this. This is something that I promised on my manifesto last year, and it's a promise that I've delivered. And I will continue to make the Senates open, as they have been this year, as we've had many students from Queen Mary and other universities attending our Senates. It's something that I promised on my manifesto, and it's something that I will continue doing. The ULU in 5 years, well, let's hope it's still here. We've been, no doubt cuts are coming. No doubt we're going to have to work out ways of not implementing the cuts. I imagine ULU is only going to get better if we have campaigning sabbaticals at the helm of the ship. Doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. The fact that many more people are involved in it, like I said, makes it more democratic, makes it more relevant, and makes it more prestigious, not just some boys' club sitting behind closed doors.
Thank you. We can take a second round of questions, but are there any supplementary questions to what's been asked at all so far, or any responses that Claire or Raj have said? No. Yes.
I don't know whether this is appropriate, but can I just make a sort of question about, I'm just a bit disappointed that Raj isn't here, and a little bit concerned as well that, if he's going for the position of President of ULU, I just want to question his sort of seriousness of going for the position if he's unable to turn up to his own hustings, and
what
there's
I will
any
do,
more information about why he couldn't make it.
one of the purposes for recording the hustings this year, which has never been done before, is such that a wider range of people can see it. And one of them, obviously, is if Raj can't attend, he can hear the questions that have been asked, and he'll be able to respond, admittedly not necessarily directly to the hustings video itself, but we'll be able to do his own blogging or perhaps webcamming later in response to those questions.
I appreciate that, but I'm just a little bit sort of confused and sort of a bit cross really as well, because I've taken time out of my day to come and be here to see Raj's responses, and he's not even bothered to turn up. I just wondered whether he'd given any reasons for his.
He has given reasons, yeah. The reasons that he'd given is, Dear Rob, unfortunately due to a university meeting which I'm unable to rearrange, I will not be able to attend the hustings today. I'd like to send my apologies, and I was wondering if you would read out a short statement for me, please find below. And that was the statement that I read out for his hustings speech.
For the record, can I say something? I was unable to attend the graduation ceremony today because of the hustings.
I'll pass those comments on to him, certainly, but I think we need to draw a line under it.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to cause a great problem. I just wanted to raise that as a
No, that's absolutely your right. Question.
How would you react if the police approach you for information on student protesters and troublemakers? In inverted commas.
Okay, so this is in terms of the questions the candidates put earlier on in terms of the ULU's reputation.
No, that's a question on its own right.
Oh, it's a new question, okay. New question. Second new question. There is one. Round 3. Yeah.
What do you think ULU's position should be on current NHS reforms and
ULU's position on
the current NHS reforms?
NHS reforms.
And
okay.
what do you think the role of ULU Med Group is going to be in lobbying?
And ULU Med Group. Third question. Okay, we'll have a round of two and then we'll draw a line for that one. So the first question, Sean, just to reiterate that question please, is
How will you react if the police ask for information on student protests or so-called troublemakers?
okay, and the second one was about NHS reforms and what should be ULU's position and the role of ULU Med Group.
Both excellent questions and both something that I've had to face in the last couple of weeks, as you can imagine. I'm not here to do the dirty work of the police. I'm not here to do the dirty work of the management. If the police come to me for records of our students, I will say no. I will deny them access to the student records. I will not do what they did at another college in ULU last year, just willy-nilly hand over the entire records of the Islamic Society. I will say no until they produce a warrant or any other official court order. And even then, I will do that kicking and screaming. So no, I'm not going to be acting on behalf of the police. In terms of the NHS, we have to defend our public services. The NHS is one of the most important public services that we all use. We use as, you know, as every single element of our society uses it, and our students most definitely need the NHS. We have thousands and thousands of students that are using that train at the NHS provisions at Bart's Hospital. We have, which is one of the Queen Mary campuses, they are now facing 630 job cuts. And this is something that I was campaigning down at Queen Mary last week, 2 weeks ago, in order to defend those job losses, because the last thing that we need is an NHS that's turned into a business run by businesses for profit and not for the needs of the patients and society.
Okay, that's it. That concludes the questions, unless there's a supplementary at all. Tag on. So I'll just take the original. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what you think the role of ULU Med Group should be in this.
Well, the ULU Med Group is something that the Vice President is under the Vice President's remit, dealing with sports and societies. I know they've been active this year. I know the Med Group down at Queen Mary have been active and do not support the cuts to the NHS provision, and I think they should continue campaigning. They have to be linking up the issues of what's happening in the NHS to what's happening in education, that these are ideological cuts, that we do not need these cuts. These are cuts because our government fundamentally wants to reshape our society according to the needs of the market and the richest in society, so the Med Group can continue campaigning.
Just wondering, I mean, ULU is not funded for education, even though we do have a budget this year which was making a surplus from last year. As ULU president, what do you think your other kind of remits are that you should be paying attention to as well?
Well, first of all, we're very pleased that the last year's presidents did introduce a campaigns budget of £3,000 to oversee 22 colleges and institutions, which we have not spent even half of that yet. We organised 9th of December on £300 when the NUS spent thousands upon thousands, including paying full-paid security guards to monitor their demonstration for a glow-stick vigil, which only 200 people turn up. So I think we're very capable of managing our campaigns budget and reaching out to as many students as possible. Obviously, there are other priorities. I've said this both in my manifesto and in speeches and whatnot. We have housing issues. We have the multiple occupancy tenancy agreement that obviously affects students. Boris's plan for housing, Boris's plan for transport are things that we need to be campaigning on. We need to continue with the fees and cuts issue, because that's only just begun, hasn't it? It's next year when these cuts and fees are going to be implemented. It's this year, in fact, after April, after the budgets, that universities are going to have to face the cuts already without the next year's budgets coming into play. So it's going to be a massive time, a massively difficult time in the next couple of months. I'll continue doing that, as well as all the other things.
Thank you very much for those two supplementary questions. To remind you, the candidates, Claire Solomon, who's just finished speaking, and the other candidate in this election is Vraj. There is also a third candidate, an option on the ballot paper, which is reopened nominations. Thank you, candidates. We now move to the hustings for Vice President of ULU. The order was determined earlier on by draw of lots. First to speak is Ik, followed by Victoria, Kay, Sean, and finally Emily. if I can ask Ik to come to the front here. After you've introduced yourself, we'll then start the clock. Okay, in your own time.
Hi, I'm Untitled Chapter. I'm a final year history student at SOAS. So I had a chat with friends and we talked about what ULU meant to us. We realised that we didn't know much about it. We realised that ULU was supposed to be doing a whole range of things for us. The role of Vice President is about internal campaigns and student engagement, and quite a lot of us had no idea. I want to become Vice President to change that. I want ULU to listen to you, because you are who ULU fights for. Some of the main things that came up were publicising ULU, organising the website so it makes sense, revamping it, so we have access to the information that we need, resources to help us, part of a student movement. We want to know that there was legal advice, and only one of us knew that there was a housing database that we could access. These are great services, and really useful for any student when they need them. But when we're in trouble, we weren't quite sure they were there. I want to change that. But all those things aren't enough. The Vice President role is extensive, and we as students need more from it. We need pre-registration for the ULU gym. We need an online jobs board. We need faster turnarounds on forms, more rooms available for sports and societies, keep Wednesdays free, and give greater recognition of sports and societies' achievements. We need the VP to lobby for internal issues, women's rights when it comes to courses that are underrepresented on. We need to make sure individuals have a place that they can go to and support that they can access when something is wrong. We need support and recognition of liberation campaigns, because these are issues that affect everyone. They are part of the wider culture of the University of London. We need a place that people can go to for help, and advice for their own protests and lobbying of student issues. More than that, we need a place that lobbies on our behalf. As University of London students, I'll help you lobby on those issues. We need a free book pledge, the ability to borrow free books from any other UL college. We need to fight unfair penalisation of our fellow international students. And we need greater accountability and representation. And we need to provide you with opportunities, not just sports and societies, but with volunteering opportunities. I know from personal experience that they make a difference, and I will help you to shape our world. These are the things that I will do. Vote for me, Untitled Chapter #1, the ULU Vice President.
That candidate was Ikram Chowdhury. The next candidate to speak is Victoria.
Thank you. Hi guys, I'm Victoria. I'm the current ULU Vice President, and I'm also a former Queen Mary student and a volunteering officer. This year, I started my year by talking to students, and not only students, but also sabbatical officers at the University of London. I personally find it a very, very important task to carry out continuously throughout the year, but also at the beginning of the year, because that would enable the Vice President, or any sabbatical officer in fact, to kind of find out the issues that the students and the sabbatical officers are facing, and also what is it that they may be needing help with in the following year. I think it's very important for you to do that, because obviously our structure is very unique in a sense that we are obviously a federal organisation, and we are not only about giving representation to you about your own local student union, but also it's about providing services that you don't necessarily receive locally. So that came about ULU's very first volunteering centre, which I put on my manifesto. We launched it in the beginning of the end of January, and I also initiated the establishment of the ULU Bonus Society, which then became the student-led project for the ULU Legal Advice Centre. So these are all very important projects for ULU that I believe we should be providing, because many students actually cannot benefit from these kind of services locally and also in in my manifesto, you can see that I try to emphasize the things that I have already achieved this year, because I really just want to give you a taste of what kind of Vice President I have been so far. I would like to show you that I am hardworking and that I can get things done. And I also try to emphasize 3 words. I said, for empowering another team and supporting the Vice President, please re-elect Victoria. I believe these 3 words are very, very important actually. For being a supportive Vice President, the past 8 months, I created a open job policy. I have never ever turned away a single student, even if I was very, very busy. I believe it's a very, very important thing to do, because in the end of the day, I am there because of the students. I was elected by the students, so I kind of view students as my bosses, and you wouldn't want to turn away your boss if they wanted to speak to you, right? Also, an innovative vice president, I think it's very important to be innovative. Obviously, the student union structure allows people to come in and out, every 1 or 2 years, because they need to have fresh ideas there. And I don't only just, I not only want to just work on my existing project, but I also would like to introduce new things, such as working on your employability prospects, etc. In terms of empowering, I think it's so important to not just be one of the students, but you're a leader as well. You need to make sure that those students who would like to work with you, you are there to empower them and to make them know that they can do it. So to provide the kind of support and the kind of self-confidence towards them, that's very, very important. Thank you.
That candidate who just spoke was Victoria Schmoller. The next candidate to speak is Kay. Has Kay arrived? Kay hasn't. We've had no communication, I'm afraid, from Kay. So we'll move to the next candidate, which is Sean. 3 minutes after your introduction.
Very old-fashioned and actually read something. Sean Riley from Birkbeck College. I'm standing to help make ULU even more effective in the fight against cuts and fees, more representative, more visible and democratic. Make no mistake, education cuts, fees and marketisation are the biggest issues facing students today. This is a fight for education and access to education. Student union officers must not shy away from this fight. I've been at the forefront of the battle against cuts and fees, organising marches, meetings and rallies, helping to build the London Student Assembly as a democratic forum for debate for all students. A ULU united against cuts and fees will be even more effective than it has been in the last year. I'm up for the fight and believe we can win. I believe in the power of people on the streets. As Vice President, I will internally coordinate our education campaigns and make sure small and specialist colleges have their say too. I will institute and support liberation campaigns for LGBT, disabled, women and black students, too often neglected by their student unions. I stand for no platform for fascists and against Islamophobia, sadly all too prevalent in our society today. I'll make clubs and societies more visible across the university. We have superb clubs and societies, but too often they're like hidden under a bushel. We need to widen access and visibility. I've been involved with ULU for over 2 years, sitting on Senate, the Laurels Committee and leading campaigns. I've run a small and specialist student union, sitting on the governing body and representing students. I sit on the NUS NEC for mature and part-time students also. I understand governance and will make sure students, not external trustees, set the direction of ULU. I will campaign for free access for all students to Senate House Library and for student Oyster cards to be available for part-time students too. I will launch internal campaigns to highlight the visibility of the liberation groups and mature and part-time students. I will campaign against racist student visa restrictions and procedures across our university, and I will help set up societies networks such as the Palestine Network, bringing together local societies. I will help organise internal training for students to become legal observers on demos and for unions to become even more effective at campaigning. Coming from a specialist college, I understand the issues facing small and specialist colleges, and I will work to help them share resources and experience and also to give advice and practical support. The VP also works with the Med Group, vital at a time that the NHS is being privatised. I will assist where I can and make that a priority campaign. I will argue for and support the London Living Wage campaign, a campaign I helped to win at Birkbeck for all university staff. We must not pay poverty wages to vital members of our college community. I will stand with UCU in unison when they take action to defend jobs and education, because their fight is our fight. If you want an experienced principal vice president who will tirelessly campaign for students and against cuts, vote Sean Riley, number 1 for ULU Vice President. Thank you.
That candidate there was Sean Riley. The final candidate to speak for Vice President is Emily. Emily. 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Emily Tapping and I'm the current Vice President Academic Affairs at King's College London Student Union. And I have the K, sorry. So, where have I come from? Over the last 18 months, I've worked really hard at King's. It went from being a pretty apathetic union with pretty much no representation for underrepresented groups, and I'd like to think I've changed that. I've instigated liberation groups, which have never happened before at King's, and I've helped to campaign against cuts and fees at King's. I'm also the chair of the audit group, which represents the 20 research unions in the country, and through them, I've campaigned against immigration changes that are unfair to our students. I've campaigned for widening access, and I've helped to work on pathways to professions such as medicine and law to help widen access those also. The one thing I've learned over this year, though, is the best student union vice presidents and presidents are the ones that help facilitate and resource their own student campaigners. There's no point in standing here and telling you that I'm going to be able to do it all myself. It's definitely not how it works. My forward plan. There's an election coming up in 2012. It would be absolutely ridiculous of us to not spend the next year campaigning tirelessly to make sure that every single candidate that's running for the Mayor of London has student issues at the top of their list. I'm not talking about cuts and fees, because I don't think the Mayor of London's got much input into that, especially not Boris Johnson. But I am talking about transport, I am talking about housing, I am talking about the amount of international students that rock up in London and get thrown in some corridor for £400 a week. What else am I working about? Sports and societies. I've had too many, well, mostly just calls on really, coming to King's and saying, why can't we compete in bucks? Why can't we compete? You know, bigger unions need to start taking responsibility for the smaller unions. When the cuts start happening, because they're going to get worse, we need to make sure that we're there supporting people. I want to develop the networks. I think these are so vital to improve representation. Post-grad networks have only just begun, which is absurd. We've already started campaigning to get fair access for journals and to get University of London universities working together to make sure that we're sharing resources as best as possible. I want to develop the International Students Network within ULU, and I want to develop MedGroup. I know that everyone's talking about it like it's some buzzword, but having seen the little resources they've had this year and how much campaigning they should be doing and need to be doing, we've done a lot of it through the audit group, but it's not good enough and it still needs more. I'd like to talk really quickly about accountability as well. First of all, I've said in my manifesto I want to make Senate bigger. I want to make sure that all the vice presidents and presidents are coming together more often. But I want to talk about NUS for a second. ULU isn't a part of NUS. I know many unions that are University of London unions feel let down by NUS. They feel like they've not been represented. And one of the reasons for this is that we're not engaging with them. We could have made it so that the line that was being pushed for the whole of the last 2 years was a line that ULU could have agreed with if we'd have engaged with them slightly more proactively. So yeah, Emily. Vote Emily #1 for Vice President for ULU.
That candidate is Emily Tapping. So you heard first from Ikramul Chowdhury, Victoria Schmoller. Kay unfortunately not with us. Sean Miller-Ronchka then spoke, and finally Emily Tapping. There is also a sixth candidate in that election. It's an option on the ballot paper, which is to reopen nominations. We're now going to take some questions from the floor. I'm going to start with the first round of 2 questions, and I'll announce the order of answering in a minute. Question 1.
How are we going to stand?
Yeah, probably best if all the candidates are supposed to come to the front. Probably obscure me, it doesn't matter. I'm here functionally. Stand in front of the table, I think. You might have to shuffle around to accommodate your cameraman.
Yeah.
Legs? I've got legs. I've got legs.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like a small photo.
Yes.
Go down in history. Okay, first question. So you don't get any questions, isn't it? Okay, I saw hand at the back first. Your question?
Over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, what have you done other than cut some fees to help improve student life and student experiences? And how do you think you're more experienced than the other candidates? Obviously without naming names.
Okay, thank you. And then this...
how does the candidates intend to raise the visibility of ULU services?
Okay, and then we'll definitely have a second round, but we'll answer those questions first. First person to answer is Emily, then Sean, then Victoria, then Nick.
Okay, I talked quite a lot about what I've done for the last 3 years. Before I was Vice President, I was working quite a lot in King's as an academic rep and as a part of Student Council. what have I done for the last few years to make student life better? We've been, I mean, aside from cuts and fees, as that has kind of dominated for the last year and a half, but I've also been doing quite a lot of work, obviously locally within King's, been campaigning for better use of things like Turnitin, which is something that affects quite a lot of students on a really kind of logistical basis, and it's not groundbreaking, and everyone often says that my job's quite boring because I just work really with trying to get exam feedback and stuff like that, but someone's got to do it. So yeah, for the last 2 years I've been working quite hard on academic stuff. We've managed to completely change our union to make it much more accessible, and the services much more accessible to students. Like I said, we've got the first liberation groups at King's ever, and we've also, for the first time ever, been really working hard to put, again this sounds quite boring, but we've put lots of information into consultations that are happening on a government basis, like key information set ones and student charter ones, to make sure that everyone's being represented.
Thank you. Sure.
Done many things at Birkbeck. We're a small and specialist union with a small staff base, and a lot to do. Done things like got the exam timetables published earlier this year through a campaign we run on academic board and other committees. I've ensured continuing representation for students. One proposal was to stop students being students' companions to be able to speak at disciplinary hearings. I've prevented that from happening. I've been sitting on ULU Senate helping to keep those officers to account, putting forward constitutional amendments and exciting things like that. I've helped get the London living wage for everybody at Birkbeck, including our bar staff, and student bar staff. I assist students on every issue. I go to panels with them. I help them with myriad of problems, assist clubs and societies, help our liberation groups. So you name it, whatever happens at Birkbeck and in student life, I've had a hand in doing it, but doing a lot of the committees and doing a lot of the things of that nature.
Sorry, just very quickly, Sean, you answered both questions, didn't you? Just, no, you haven't. Okay. We'll go through answering question 1, yeah, and then go back to Emily and answer question 2. Sorry, just to clarify that for everyone.
Is it my turn?
It is Victoria, yeah.
Can I just clarify the question? So you are interested in finding out what we've done in the past 3 years, apart from cuts and fees?
And how it's sort of actually benefited student life, not just you tried and it failed.
Okay. Well, I come from a volunteering background. The way I actually got initially involved with my local student at Queen Mary was through volunteering. And then the next year I was running for volunteering officer, I got that. And we were looking at basically new ways of trying to introduce volunteering, because despite the fact that there were loads of publicity material everywhere lying around on campus, volunteers, or like students, didn't really actually want to get involved, so the numbers weren't really growing. So we had to, research on how we can attract volunteers from a different kind of, point of view, and that was successful. We increased our numbers a lot. Can't remember it from my head. And this year, obviously, I can just give you a list of what I've been doing. I have been very supportive in terms of recognising new club societies. We have 7 new club societies and networks, which is basically part of our group is one of them. I also try to campaign internally in terms of mental health and physical health awareness. I introduced a free self-defense class and free safety awareness classes. Just a sneak peek. I've also been leading the ULU regulation amendments working group, which I think is very, very important, because these kind of documents are very important in terms of the running of the union. The current regulations do not correspond with the constitution, so it definitely needs updating. I also achieved to have a free purpose ball, which is I think is really great. We never had a free purpose ball previously. We had it costing about £50 per ticket, and I think in order to be able to celebrate our students who have achieved sporting excellence, I think it's a very, very good way to widening access to these awards. I have those things there.
Well, over the past few years, I've been working with Global Classrooms London. Global Classrooms London aims to bring the modern United Nations to state schools. So we've worked with the school in East London, Mulberry School for Girls. Before we started the programme, most of these girls didn't want to go to university or ended up getting married quite early. So with this programme, we're aiming to broaden their horizons, getting people from less traditional backgrounds into higher education. And we've had quite large success. So we had many of the girls going on to IR programmes, into politics, into law. Furthermore, we work with other state schools to bring experience, because it's not just about educating about the UN, it's about giving them broaden horizons, because with university life, it's not just about you getting a degree, it's about meeting new people and gaining new experiences. So if I was to be elected, I want to work on this, providing more volunteering opportunities, as well as, you know, promoting the services that ULU provides.
Okay, thank you. That was answers to your question. Would you like to remind the candidates of what your question
Oh
was?
yeah, sure. I was just asking how the candidates would increase the visibility of current ULU services.
Okay, I'm going to impose a 1 minute candidate Emily.
There's a lot. The responsibility, I think, is actually partially on each member union of ULU to help promote its services. As if anybody's been an officer before, you'll already know how difficult it is to promote your own services to your own students, let alone something that's supposed to span 22 different institutions, that some of which are in Egham. I think that one of the problems that we have at the moment is that because you're so busy running your own union, you don't really, as in ULU, there's not really much communication between, say, the presidents of each individual union. So often they don't really know what's going on. There's a lot to be said for communication and not just through emails. And I think that Senate should be the place where stuff like that happens, but unfortunately it isn't at the moment. And there's often a bit of a conflict. So I think there's going to have to be some sort of ULU-wide strategy for getting everyone to buy into the services that are available if it's going to work in any way.
Thank you. Sean.
Well, when I first got involved with Birkbeck, we didn't know what ULU did, how we could get involved, that there were all these amazing clubs and societies, like we've got a big band here. It's extraordinary what ULU can do for its members. The problem is we need to, as officers, we need to go out and tell the student union officers who are our members what we can do for their students. So I just think it's a very basic communication thing. We need to get people on side, talk to them, tell them what ULU can do, particularly the small and specialists, and where they can plug into ULU to make things better. If we organise things better, use our contacts, speak to people. Don't just send out an email, you need to ring people and talk to them. So I think it's quite old-fashioned communication and getting people on side that will make ULU more visible. But also the campaigns we're doing, if they're relevant to the student unions, the visibility will increase anyway.
Thank you. Victoria.
I think it's physically impossible to go up to 170,000 students and speak to them about what ULU services are. Obviously, some ways of communication don't necessarily work, but at the same time, what my kind of project approach towards things is really just to get students involved. The project that I've started this year, volunteering with the Legal Advice Centre, they're both student-led projects. So if you involve students in the kind of leading stage, then obviously you need to kind of imagine it as a network. Those students are going to be telling their friends, those friends are going to tell their friends, so you can bring people together. So that's to me is the most efficient way of communicating, really just to involve as many students as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was answer to your question. Oh, sorry.
Okay. In terms of promoting ULU services, I believe that we can revamp the website. Because if you're at Royal Holloway, if you're at St George's, or if you're at Queen Mary, it's not easy for you to come to Mallet Street. And, it costs money to go around. So I believe we can get more services online, so we can fully digitise volunteering opportunities. We can, create a jobs board, so where internships, and they can advertise, which not only creates a funding stream for ULU, it means we've got greater access to more services. So we can also work with the Careers Group and the University of London Housing Service to make it much easier to type in housing. If you currently type housing on ULU's website, you get a link for like a postgrad opportunity. It doesn't quite link to housing opportunities. I also want to work with all the SU presidents in making sure that we can raise a profile on each college campus. So I also pledge to have monthly surgeries and monthly meetings with each SU president to discuss what services they think are more relevant to their college.
Sorry. The order was, for the first two questions, Emily, Sean, Victoria, then Nick. For this next question, round two, one question, will be Sean, Victoria, Nick, then Nick. The final question, which will be round three, will be Victoria, then Nick, Emily, then Sean. Okay, so next question. You've already asked the question, but you come back for a supplementary at the end of these rounds. We've got one here and one over there. That's basically one question each. Yep. Go for it, yeah.
Small and specialist colleges have been mentioned, but I'd like a bit more detail on what, if elected, you plan to do for ULU's small and specialist unions. I think that's the remit of the speaking.
Okay, well that's a one-round question. Small specialist colleges, it starts with Sean, then to Victoria, then Vic, then Emily.
As a person from a small and specialist college, it has been really difficult because I don't think we've been prioritised. Our meetings have not been properly advertised or followed up. We can do a lot more. I mean, it really is communication and sharing of knowledge. We had a meeting with the Small and Specialist Forum the other day. We were talking about how we can resist cuts on our governing body, how we can effectively vote against and lobby our management and show that we're not going to stand for this. And all that needed was people to talk, people to come together to talk. But the meetings need to be taken more seriously, and I think the Vice President needs to be more visible in our college. I don't think in the 2 years I've been a Vice President ever has come to our college, so that's a big problem.
Victoria.
Small and Specialist Forum, I think that's a fantastic way to bring together the small and specialist colleges, and I think it's very, very important. Unfortunately, this year we have kind of problems in bringing people together. And God knows, I definitely tried. Obviously, with all the cuts and demonstrations and all that, everybody was just completely tied up at their own student unions. It was very, very difficult to get people here. We had maybe 1 or 2 initial meetings at the beginning of the term, and now kind of it's all picking up. This is something that I actually talked to senators about. I asked the senators and small and special college representatives whether they actually want to bring it back, whether they find it important, because it had to be an initiation on my part, and I definitely did that. If you look at the projects that I've been doing, they are actually for small and specialist colleges, because the big colleges already have the services that I'm promoting, from volunteering to legal advice center and all that. So I'm definitely working on supporting small and specialist colleges, not only through the forum, but also in other ways. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on that.
Thank you.
Okay, I've spent the past 4 years at SAS, so I'm well aware of our lack of comparable facilities to the larger colleges. So as ULU Vice President, I want to make sure that we can promote ULU services in the colleges and make students, at Courtauld, SOAS, School of Pharmacy, Tropical Medicine, know what ULU has to offer. Furthermore, a place like SOAS is losing all of its teaching funding, and that is a great mistake, because SOAS teaches specialist courses such as even the same thing at Tropical Medicine or Courtauld. Those courses should be defended. So as ULU Vice President, as well as promoting the services that you provide, so you guys get a comparable service as a larger college, I also want to make sure that your courses are protected. So I will collaborate with all of those various SC presidents.
Thank you. Finally, Emily.
I'm not going to pretend that King's is in any way small and specialist. It's a bit special. And I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers for small and specialists, because I don't. But from what I can gather, the issues are around resources, again, around access to facilities, around just general support for your campaigns. I know that you don't have the luxury of staff members like we do, and all these sorts of things. So my big plan is essentially, and I mentioned it before, it's like an adoption agency. Not that I think you're orphan children. But it is time for big unions to really start supporting them. And I don't think that ULU can do that, because I don't think it itself, because I don't actually think that it has got the resources to be able to do that for small and specialists. And I think that unions where they are getting a lot of money from their university and they do have a lot of staff support, should start kind of helping each other out. And I know I made a big promise at the beginning of the year to Courtauld that we would too, but it's just not part of what happens at the moment. And I think that you really need to start ingraining that sort of thing into the way unions work. And I think ULU has a big part to play in pushing that agenda.
Thank you. Those are the answers to your question. Come back here for one question. Yeah.
Can you tell us what does liberation actually mean and how you're going to campaign for it?
Okay. Liberation, I mean Victoria, then Ick, Emily, then Sean.
Liberation, well, technically speaking, if you look at campaign and obviously external campaigns, I think this should be the remit of the president. I understand that this year it's not something I picked up, because it's just simply not my remit. I understand that I was working on it so far. I have been trying to, help out in ways where I knew that the president was not necessarily able to do certain things. So definitely initiated the establishment of the Women's Network, the LGBT network of ULU so far. So that's definitely something. If you would like to clarify your...
I said, what does liberation mean, and how would you campaign for it? That's if you want a clarification.
Okay, well, to me, liberation means providing access to those who don't necessarily benefit currently or current kind of setup, the conditions. I think we need to kind of provide ways how we can basically involve these people, and I think infrastructure like building a campaigns network at ULU would be very, very useful. But then again, it's not my remit as the Vice President.
Thank you, that's time. Hip.
The classic definition of liberation campaigns often falls into three categories. Minority liberation, LGBT liberation, and women's liberation. I think that alongside that, it also should be about personal liberation. As ULU Vice President, I want to provide support to raise awareness for various campaigns. For example, I want to provide support for women who are in courses that are traditionally underrepresented, like physics. Women face considerable discrimination at the university level when it comes to physics. In terms of other campaigns, I want to ensure that everyone can be involved, because as I mentioned earlier, it's part of our wider culture. It's not just restricted to one particular group of people. We are one united society in the University of London, and we should all celebrate it, and everyone should be proud of who they are. So I think, as Vice President, I want to ensure internally that every single person is comfortable with who they are, and I'll be willing to work with whoever's elected president to ensure that externally we can ensure that there is liberation across the UK.
Thank you. Emily.
I won't be able to give you an exact definition of what liberation is, because I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I can tell you how I've worked with it at King's. All the groups that I've staff are very much autonomous. They work in their own special way, but they've mostly worked towards ensuring that they have better representation and ensuring that they're making King's a better place for them. But in the wider perspective, I think liberation to me means fighting for rights, ensuring opportunities for everybody, and making sure that the voices of people who've been quietened through some reason, whether it be disabled students or women or anything, some way that society has quietened their voice, it's enabling their voice to be projected through some other means. But I also think that these sorts of things work better together. There's no better way to work than in numbers. You can definitely achieve more if you're in a wider group. And in terms of how I want to make the networks work better, I want to make sure that every single union is involved, and I want to make sure that every single person feels confident and comfortable enough to be a part of that and to campaign as a group.
Thank you. Sean.
Well, liberation means equality, it means inclusion, and it means freedom. I'm involved in the liberation campaign myself. This is something we've got to fight for. It's not just something we can say these nice words. There is homophobia, there is racism, there is sexism, and there is disablism on our campuses. Think about what student unions do, what nights they put on. Think about access to buildings. These are things that often people don't think about. I think liberation is the key internal campaign for the Vice President to be running, actually, because it's actually about making our student unions equal and safe for everybody, and having that no platform policy, and saying no to Islamophobia, and saying no to anti-Semitism, and saying you can be gay our night and it's not just a heteronormative night. So I'm going to be there fighting internally within our student unions for that liberation, getting student union officers to actually think about what they do rather than just trundle along and say we believe in equality. And so often, the events they put on and the way their students' unions are set up are not inclusive.
Right, in the interest of balancing who speaks first and last, one final round, one question. So another, because you've already asked a question. Oh, two hands, I did. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I wanted to ask something that you all kind of touched on along the way, which is how do you see your relationship as Vice President with the President? What do you see the role of the Vice President in relation to the President?
Okay, thank you for that question. The first to answer is Incremal, then Emily, Sean, and then Victoria.
Okay, for me, the vice president role, as you know, it's constitutionally divided between internal campaigns and external campaigns. But I believe the vice president can work with the president and provide him support where needed, and the other way around. So I believe that it can be... Sorry?
Or her.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Whoever is elected, so she or he is elected president, I believe that we can work in a symbiotic relationship. So while we may take, for example, I may take the lead on internal campaigns, and he or she may take the lead on external campaigns, I believe we can work together, and I don't think there has to be any hostility. And I think the two sabbatical roles can work together to ensure that ULU fights for what you believe in and provides the services that you deserve.
Thank you. Emily.
Yeah, I agree that we should throw ourselves free of these shackles and boxes of names of president and vice president. You're both elected, you've both got your own strengths, you've both got what you're able to do, and you both know what you want to achieve. I believe a good team should be able to work together, they should be able to come to a compromise, and they should be able to both be working towards the same end. It doesn't matter if you don't get along, and it doesn't matter if you don't have the same politics. You're here for the students, and you should be working towards making that the most important thing on the agenda. So, as far as I'm concerned, you just play to what you use your strengths, you do what you're able to do, and you don't worry about whether who's the president or the vice president.
Sure. Well, some might say that the president and vice president is like a marriage. I agree with that. Well, clearly we want a united campaign team. The biggest issue facing us is education cuts and funding. And what I want is a strong, fierce campaign team saying no to cuts and no to fees. And I think the vice president and president elected should use their skills as they can, divide the role as is best, not necessarily as is written black and white on a piece of paper. I want a strong team with a variety of skills that will go out there and fight for ULU students and make sure that we're not seeing the cuts that are being proposed.
Victoria.
I think it's actually a very, very good question. This year I have been facing very, very big difficulties, and I know that the current president is clapping, as much as she can here. But unfortunately, the communication, the cooperation did not work out very well. And this is not necessarily something that, comes down to personal difficulties or difficulties in your manifesto. At the end of the day, you do have different remits. And I think as a vice president, I have been, definitely increasing my pledge as much as possible. At the end of the day, if the vice president or the president, let's say, is put into a difficult position where you want to be representing as many students as possible, and you want to kind of pursue what the Senate tells you to do, because at the end of the day you are accountable to Senate. But let's say your other team member does not necessarily say what can you do about it. At the end of the day, there might come difficulties and disagreements. And sometimes it's not very, very easy to be a team, but sometimes maybe you need to differentiate yourself and kind of, I don't know, just not be on the same platform. That's what I think.
That's time. Thank you. That was the final question. I don't think we've got time for any supplementary things on that. Just to remind you of the candidates, in the order that they spoke, you have Ikram Chowdhury, Victoria Schmoller. Kay is not able to be with us, but is still a continuing candidate. Sean Winaronsky and Emily Tapping. And obviously, there is also the option of re-open nominations on that. Thank you, candidates. Going through the headhunting candidates. Okay, the next hustings is for that of editor of London Student Newspaper. The order of speaking is Hesham, then Alex, both for 3 minutes. Hesham, to the front. Your time will start once you've introduced yourself.
Seems there was some point you didn't say.
Well, I'm just waiting for everyone to settle down. Interfere with me. Okay, introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Hisham and I'm running for London Student Editor. Thank you very much for joining us, especially on such a glorious day, and I hope you will be able to make a more informed decision. Just very quickly, in 3 minutes, neither candidate will be able to tell you exactly why you should vote for them beyond all doubt, so please do come and speak to me at the end. I'm more than happy to stick around. So I think I'm running on a platform which is boosted by the fact that I have the past experience, the present skills and the future vision to do a fantastic job of a really, really important publication, especially in times such as this. My vision is tripartite. I want to cultivate a voice that is powerful, that is inclusive and that is dynamic. By powerful, I mean I want a voice that not only holds a mirror up to society and helps us to reflect on society, but also helps to shape society. A voice that can create change, that can actually influence change within society. And especially in times such as this, not only within things like education reform, but we've seen what's happened at places like the LSE. I think that now there's a desperate need for investigative journalism, where students are interested in exactly what the universities are involved in and exactly which ways they can interact with that. In terms of an inclusive voice, I'm very well aware that some people think that this is a well-worn path, that actually we're sort of in some sort of post-inclusivist phase, but I completely disagree with that. And I still think that there are ostracised and marginalised groups, and I think that the London students should aim to reflect the diversity of ULU as much as possible. And what I mean by that is I think we can have liberation columns, and I think we can have special editions for things such as Black History Month to celebrate not only the multiculturalism of today, but the challenges and the tasks that we had to overcome in order to be able to have what we do have today. By a dynamic website, by a dynamic paper rather, I mean we should have more than just a paper format, which already we do. But whilst keeping a nice traditional paper so that the old-fashioned people, and people like myself indeed, can simply believe in it, read in it, engage with it, sitting in Senate House Cafe, Morn Library, LSE Library, any library, read together, we should also have a dynamic multimedia website. I know that the website is in the process of being redeveloped, and wanted to launch, if I'm elected, I want to sit down with the editor, take a look at how we can improve. I think we should have readers' blogs, I think we should have videos, I think we should have podcasts, I think we should help to create one big interactive conversation where even if you are from a smaller specialist college, as has been talked about, if you're from further apart, you can still take part, because, as is well said, the internet brings us all closer together to global village. In terms of experience and skills, can you let me know when I have a minute, please? In terms of experience and skills... 50 seconds, okay. Again, please speak to me at the end. Clearly I'm not going to have time. I think the foundation for my writing skills comes from my degree. I'm constantly having to write essays. I've written a chapter in a book that's been published by Verso alongside Tariq Ali and many other people. I'm currently helping to edit a series on Italian cinema, and the first edition, which is on neorealism, will be out in June, and I appear in the acknowledgements there. I've written for Raw, which is the King's publication, for The Notebook, which is a creative writing magazine, and for London Student throughout my 3 years. Although I should point out, because people have asked me about this, I haven't written for London Student this year, and I'll hopefully address that in the questions. I edited the Creative Writing Society novel, which was a collaborative project, which has garnered interest from Beautiful Books who want to publish it. So again, I think it's an important time. I think I have a lot of skills, I think I have vision, but most importantly, I'm willing to take on the ideas and listen to people, and I hope that we can create a more dynamic paper for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. That candidate speaker session. The next candidate to speak is Alex. Introduce yourself.
Right. Hi, I'm Alex, and I want to be the next editor of London Student. I'm current Heathrow Students' Union Communications Officer and creator and editor of The Lions. Right. I'm running for this position because I feel like I have a unique experience and skills which are integral to publishing a successful university newspaper. This year, I was elected Communications and Publications Officer, as I've said, for the HSU, the Heathrow Students' Union, and have produced a variety of publications, including booklets, posters, and even a biannual magazine. I've also co-created the first proper website for the HSU has ever had. However, I feel my biggest achievement this year has been the creation of the Lion newspaper, the first professionally produced newspaper in Heathrow's 400-year history. With a print run of 1,000, this 16-page fortnightly publication is the cheapest printed newspaper in London, costing a tiny £280 per issue. However, the paper is still of the highest standards, and so I know how to work with a tight budget and negotiate the cheapest prices for the London student, without having to compromise on the quality that students expect. One of the ways in which we can save money is bulk buying newsprint and sharing the cost with UL papers using the LSJSN, the London Student Journalism Support Network. This should save money for every college paper involved and allow us collectively to spend more on extras such as seasonal inserts and open days. It would also enable small colleges to start their own papers due to the massively reduced cost of printing. To help increase our funds, I would recruit an advertising team as soon as I'm elected, who will try and get the most amount of revenue as early as possible, focus on introducing adverts online so as to save space in print. An advertising booklet would also be produced to show advertisers the opportunities we can offer them as Europe's largest student newspaper. I would like the LSJSN to take a more pastoral role, helping develop connections between UL college papers and helping new and smaller papers gain the knowledge and expertise to succeed, whether they need help printing, designing, editing, or even financing. I would also like to introduce more London Student Open Days and get more students involved with every aspect of the paper, as well as events with industry professionals. Branding is a very important way of forging an identity for a London student. The Line has its own website, which we designed, as well as a branded Twitter, Flickr and YouTube. I would do the same with the new London Student website, as well as London Student's other online media, to ensure everything under the London Student banner looks professional, elegant and consistent. With the newspaper itself, I will continue the general style of the paper while developing it to include while tweaking the structure and layout of the paper for greater clarity, as well as introducing a colour correction system to make all the images more brighter and more professional. I also want to focus heavily on branching London Student out into other forms of media, such as more video reporting and podcasting. I wish to create a bloggers network to give publicity back to the talented writers who fill our paper every 2 weeks. And I also want to create a professional and easier to navigate website for the LSJSN with better live blogging capabilities. Finally, I want to make a London Student that is deserving of its readership. It must serve all of London students. It's not my place to speak for every London student. It's my place to allow them to speak for themselves. And London Student exists to allow these voices to be heard. For a professional and cross-platform London student that is unbiased, balanced and open to all, vote Alex for London Student Editor.
Thank you. That candidate was Alex. Can I have both of the candidates to the front here for the school photo snapshot? And put your hand up if you'd like to ask a question. Taking rounds of 3. Right, so 1, 2, 3, and then there'll be another round, so there'll be a second round after that one. Sean, your question?
What do you think of the idea of an independent newspaper? Is there such a thing, and are you claiming to have an independent newspaper?
Okay, that's the first question. The second question was, yeah.
It's a sort of double-barrel question, really. It's all well and good being able to write for a paper. How much do you know about the logistics of running a paper, and also what would you say is your biggest weakness as a candidate?
Okay.
Mine was very similar to that. So.
Okay, I'll take them.
Yeah. Okay. Will you exclude articles from writers who don't believe they fall into line with what is your vision for the paper?
Okay, that's the first round. I'll come back to the others who had their hands up for the second round. If you'd like clarification, we can always go back to the questions.
Right.
Okay, the first one to speak is Alex.
Right. As for an independent newspaper, I mean, it really does depend what you mean by an independent newspaper. I mean, financially independent, the paper hopefully will become, London Student will be able to self-finance eventually. But as for editorially independent, I think that's very, very possible and very doable. It's the sort of thing that you just have to keep things separate away from governing body things. So things like you'd have a separate editorial board that will be able to make sure that there's a fair and independent check on things, making sure that, I mean, things that have changed this year, things like moving libel checking away from the trustee board and into a separate London Student libel checker with the editor. I think it was a fantastic move to greater independence of the newspaper, as well as in-house advertising. It just makes it a complete individual entity, and I think, yeah, an independent newspaper is a very, very viable idea. Yes, I've forgotten the second question, sorry.
The second question was basically, do you think you know enough about the logistics of running a paper other than just simply writing for it, and what would you say is your biggest weakness as a candidate?
Well, as for knowing the logistics of how paper works, I mean, I did make one. I know pretty much every element of a student newspaper. I know financing, design, editing. I know all the boring bits that nobody wants to see, like InDesign and how to actually make a layout work properly. So yeah, I think I have a great all-round knowledge of a newspaper, and I don't know, greatest weakness. I don't know. I suppose maybe I want to have my hand in too many things, but I think that is doable. So that's a rubbish answer, but sorry. I don't. There you go. Oh, sorry. And as for Oh God, I've forgotten again. Sorry.
Final question was about excluding articles.
No, of course not. If it's a paper written by, if it's articles written by London students about the issues that they affect, no. There's no reason to ever exclude an article unless it breaches things like the law or libel or anything like that. So no, I don't think there's any reason to disbar anyone because they don't fall into line with my ideas. No.
Thank you. Yeah, go for it.
I'd like, if I may, to tackle the first and final questions together, and then if either of you are not satisfied, I'm more than happy to come back and try and provide some clarification. So in terms of the independence of a paper, I mean, if you're speaking structurally, so with regards to London Student and ULU, then yes, I think absolutely it should maintain an independence, but that independence shouldn't be seen as synonymous with an antagonism. So it shouldn't be constantly trying to sort of criticise ULU or constantly trying to find flaws. I think actually the way in which the union would operate best is if we could find ways of reconciliation and harmony, a harmonious union as a whole with everything that's coming out of it. If you're referring to sort of a more ideological type of independence, look, I'll absolutely say this. I don't think, like most people here, that it's possible to find an issue on which over 100,000 students agree. But what I also think is that in one's haste to try and represent everyone, you can end up representing no one. And I think that that's a massive, massive problem and something that I will be trying to counter. In terms of excluding arguments I personally disagree with, I mean, absolutely not. Dissent is a vital part of democracy. And with a democratic paper, which is what I put in my manifesto, I think that people should be able to write what they want, so long as it isn't contrary to principles which are sort of foundational and basic human rights, so things like racism, things like sexism, libel, and so on and so forth. And I mean that concludes my first and third, but like I said, I'm happy to come back to it. In terms of the logistics of running a paper, I mean the simple answer to your question is, and I freely happily admit this, I have never run a newspaper, and I will happily say that. What I will say, however, is that I managed to accumulate in various different departments the skills that are necessary, I think, to bring together, so you can fuse them together to make a newspaper. So I think over my 3 years at university, it's been a question of, do I immerse myself in one particular field, or can I try and spread myself? And what I've done is I've ended up being the president of the Creative Writing Society, a Take Part in the Debating Society. I've ended up writing for Raw and the Notebook, but also editing a book on Italian cinema. So I think I spread myself thin and over that. I've managed to accumulate various skills, which I think can come into making a publication, which is good for everyone. But again, in terms of a successful paper is only as successful as its team. And so it's all about recruiting a team, having a positive spirit, and sort of, there's a person for every task, rather than a sort of a jack of all trades, if you like. In terms of my weakness, I mean, I'm sure, like any other human being, I have many, but I'll end on a sort of cheese, if you like. None of us have weaknesses, just strengths we haven't yet learned.
Any supplementary questions on those questions and answers that have been given by candidates?
Yeah.
There are, yeah, okay. Cool. At the back first? Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering kind of going back to liberation, what we were talking about earlier, how you're going to make sure that you get people from different minority backgrounds to be involved in the paper, what you're going to do to kind of make it.
I think that's more a new question. It's all right, we'll take that as a new question later. More in terms of the answers the candidates have given about independence of the newspaper, their experience, and excluding articles. Yeah.
Both of you sort of mentioned sort of moving into new media. You've mentioned spreading yourself thin over lots of areas, and you've mentioned it in your speech earlier. Where do you see the importance of this new media, and how much time would you dedicate? And do you think you know enough about new media?
Okay, so it's new media.
Well, it's the question about excluding articles. Earlier this year, the London Student printed a column entitled "Tight Fist," which was illustrated with a fist clutching a wad of money and Star of David, contained a whole load of anti-Semitic nonsense in the middle of it. The president acted rightly, I think, to pull the London Student at that point. But what would you do when confronted with a submission like this?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, fine. Okay, Alex, sorry.
In terms of the new media, I think it's going back to what I was saying before about trying to bridge the gap between the disparate colleges, both geographically and in terms of size. I've still been part of trying to help a team at King's make a documentary of sort of student activism over the course of the past few months, and I've picked up many skills and I've learned quite a lot then. I also think that the role of the new media can fit into any sort of different section of the paper. So, for example, with sport, no one's mentioned sport, so I think we should breathe some air into that section. I think with sport, say for example, someone scores a fantastic goal, it's a wondrous goal, goal of the month, goal of the season. There's no reason why, if it's being recorded, something like that can't be put up on terms of the media and on terms of the website. And going back to the complete other opposite end of the spectrum, politics. If, for example, you're at a demonstration and you witness police violence, and no reason why something like that can't be put up. So I think the sort of role of the new media is actually not to homogenise students or the student experience, but rather to allow everyone to take part, to have a say, and to incorporate into the media what they think is currently missing. In terms of the article, I mean, I will categorically state that if I was the editor of the paper and if I'm elected the editor of the paper, then I think that racist, anti-Semitic discourse and Nazi iconography will have no place in the paper. I mean, how could one ever even attempt to sort of reconcile things like this with things like inclusivity? How could you try and make students feel included on the one hand, yet on the other hand have images which are deeply distressing and offensive to them? So that's that question.
Right. With the Lion, I'm going to go back to that again. We've actually started to branch out into new media already. I mean, what we find is the best way that it can complement the print media is to make sure that it gives basically more context to what you're producing. Things like, I mean, on the front of that issue that I've got here, we did, of course, covering our student march on the 10th of November. And we use things like Twitter and YouTube to put up the video that helps better understand the feeling and the mood that was surrounding those things. So, if anything, I think the main use of new media is to contextualise the print. As for the article published in the London Student, I will say that it was possibly it's a difficult line to bridge between freedom of speech and, of course, making sure that there's no inflammatory racism or anything like that in the paper, and of course all of that. However, personally, I don't think that article was anti-Semitic. I think that it was within the rights of libel law and the laws of the newspaper, and I think that everything printed within it was obviously meant in a satirical way, and I would stand by the current editor in printing that.
Thank you. That concludes the supplementary questions. Julie's apologising, she'll take to a meeting. We're now going into round 2, okay? And there were hands up. I'm going to take that question. You repeat your question, and I'm going to sound at the back. So.
I just wanted to know what you do to kind of make sure that liberation campaigns were...
You'll have to say that again, I'm afraid, because I can't hear because the door was creaking.
Just what you're going to do to make sure that students from minority backgrounds get involved in the paper.
So, students from minority backgrounds getting involved in the paper.
I mean, one candidate sort of touched on it a bit. I think both need to go into more detail. I mean, LSJSN's been great this year. I think it's arguably one of the best things the current editor's done is setting it up. How would each of you, if you were elected, ensure that it not only continues but actually improves in the years to come?
Okay, final question. Okay, go to Ikram.
It was mentioned earlier about investigative journalism. If you look through surveys of law students, there's always only a select few of writers. So how would you make sure that you're not spreading yourself thin, and if there are investigative journalistic pieces, that they are substantial and not, just superficial? So how can you make sure that you don't spread yourself too thin?
Thank you. Because we had supplementaries in the last round, we keep the rounds together. So, Hisham answers first, Alex.
Okay. In terms of the liberation, as I put on my manifesto, I do want to have special sections of the paper for these groups, for the marginalised and underrepresented groups. The three main ones, which one of the other candidates mentioned before, were black and minority, ethnic, disabled, and women. So I think that we should have liberation columns for each of these groups, and that would be one way in which in print in the paper you can start to cater for these groups. One of the other ways is to actually speak to representatives of these groups and see how they would like to use the paper to try to feel more included, to try to make it more inclusive. Because of course there's a possibility that you can fall into this trap of, as an editor, trying to include everyone, but it ends up being a little bit patronising. So again, I'd much more prefer it to be student group led, and so I'd like for them to be able to determine themselves how they can help. So that I hope that answers your question. With regards to the question about the LSJSN, I agree. One of the other candidates was talking before about how getting people together at Senate is a way in which you can improve teamwork, in which you can sort of put your resources together and you can have a more unified sort of vehicle. I think that the LSJSN has done that, and I think I agree completely. It's a fantastic achievement, and hopefully that can proliferate. I think if you had more regular meetings, began to regulise it, began to sort of work on training events collectively. Essentially, it's a case of putting all resources together and doing things as a unified body, which would benefit all, without sort of allowing each individual group to lose their uniqueness or the flavour that's characteristic of their particular college. And in terms of being substantial, one of the other things which I wanted to mention, which I didn't get a chance, is I think training events. So during my time at King's, one of the things I helped to organise was a speaking conference with Professor Noam Chomsky, one of the foremost world's academics and perhaps the most towering figure of the preceding century. And what he also gave after that was a special sort of academic / activist talk on how you can use the media. I think people like Noam Chomsky training events, getting figures like this, journalists to come and help, would be ways in which you can help students to make sure that their pieces are fantastic. And very finally, I've been involved with the Creative Writing Society for all of my 3 years. In my first year, I helped to set up the society. My second year, I was its president, and in this year, I've carried on in an advisory role. And at each and every single one of these sessions, it involved feedback sessions. So people are brave enough to share their creative writing, and then as a group, we give them feedback. I think a similar sort of model with the London student would also be very much at home. I think giving writers feedback on their work, and it's something I'd very much like to do. If I was editor, I wouldn't want to work just with the sub-editors. I'd like to work with individual writers themselves and talk to them. So it's a combination of feedback, but also preparation.
Thank you, Alex.
I think, with the first question, I think when you make an impartial newspaper that's open to all students with no political agenda with the paper, I think you naturally get the broadest range of students you can possibly get from all different backgrounds. I think creating single point columns can be a little bit, as Hisham was saying, patronising to an extent, and I think getting these students to come forward to write about whatever they wish shouldn't really be on their background. It should be on the content of their writing and getting them to be, all students to be involved. As for the LSJSN, as a member of it this year, I've helped to further it. I think there's a lot to be done, and as I said in my speech, I'd like to give it a more pastoral role, get it into helping new college papers set up, as well as the live blogging service across all campuses, which I think has been fantastic this year and was brilliant in the demonstrations. And I've forgotten your question, sorry.
About how do you ensure that, you know, because it's only a select few writers, how do you ensure that you write substantial pieces and
Yes.
bring yourself to
I think the key is to try and get as many editors from as many different colleges as possible, because they're the people that are going to go to societies, groupings at the different unions. And I think things like Freshers Fair, that's the sort of place where separate editors in different colleges can really come into their own and get as many people from different colleges as possible contributing.
Okay. That's round 2 completed. Any supplementary questions? No supplementary questions. There was one. There was one question over there.
Oh, that's right. I'll throw it. Just
That concludes the hustings for London Sheet Editor. The candidates standing for London Sheet Editor are Alex Hackett and Hesham and Sakai, and also there is an option on the ballot paper to reopen nominations. The final set of hustings are 2-minute speeches for student trustees who are present. Those present are Ross, Abs, James and Ian. Those who are not present are Chris, Daniel and Hannah. Chris has sent his apologies. Hannah is in Paris. Steve has been trying to get hold of Daniel. The first one to speak will be Ross, followed by Abs, James, then Ian. So, Ross, you've got 2 minutes. Introduce yourself and then I'll stop you.
Hi, Ross Spears, standing for ULU Student Trustee, second year History and Politics student at Queen Mary and member of Queen Mary Student Council. I'm standing as a candidate for Student Trustee because I have the necessary skills for this role and I understand what this role takes. First and foremost, I want to stand for student democracy. Over the past few years, there has been a process of introducing external trustees into unions. I'm someone who's not afraid to make himself heard, who is not afraid to stand up for what I believe in, and I will stand as a strong student voice on this body and stand up to external trustees. You must be a union run for students and by students. Secondly, I have the commitment, responsibility, organising and engagement skills to do this role. I've developed these throughout student council, throughout working on these bodies. I know what it takes to be on a governing body. I know what it takes to make yourself heard. I want to ensure accountability and a relevant union. We need to build on the successes of ULU over the past year, being more than a bar, more than a gym. I've been involved in that process. I know how to take it forward. Whatever sabbatical you vote for this year, I will stand behind them in making sure that ULU matters in our students' lives. I want good financial and legal governance for the union. This is possibly the most important part of being a trustee. As I said, I am not afraid of making myself heard. If SABs cross the boundaries in terms of legal things, I will be there telling them to stop. I've been through Queen Mary's Constitution and holding people to account on that basis. I will do the same with ULU. I know what it takes to go through these documents, to hold people to account on their basis. I've experienced in working with finances at Queen Mary and things like that. I want to provide the resources for sabbaticals to be able to carry out their political programmes. But I will not let them bankrupt this union, and I will stand there and make sure that it cannot do that. So vote Ross Spear #1 for ULU trustee, for a strong ULU, a relevant ULU and a democratic ULU.
Thank you. That candidate was Ross Spear. The next candidate to speak is Abs. Introduce yourself.
My name is Abs, last year student trustee and running again for ULU student trustee. Thank you to those who have shown a commitment so far by campaigning, because you are the greatest strength to our movement. Having last year already held this position as student trustee and on the appointments ruling committee of ULU, I know how the biggest union in Europe operates. I will form a network with universities across the nation so that ULU remains at the heart of the student movement. The coalition government tell us that they have the courage to see the Brown Review through. But let me tell you this, there is nothing courageous about cutting education funding by 80%. There is nothing courageous about diminishing the hopes and aspirations of young people in this country. There is nothing courageous about breaking promises. Last year, as a ULU trustee, we introduced a new constitution and established a strategic framework which outlined the path ULU would be taking, like expanding the London living wage, and now I wish to see that through. ULU is more than a gym membership, and this year will bring ULU to your colleges and your universities so that you can partake in our facilities. 50,000 students from across the country do not travel to our capital and protest because they wish to go unheard. Students have spoken. They have spoken clearly and loudly, and we cannot let them down. As a reappointed trustee, we will work harder, listen harder, and engage harder with students across the country. ULU needs someone dedicated to the job, and I am that person. Together, with your vote, we can be the change that makes a better future possible. This is our degree, our career, our future we must fight for. Thank you.
Thank you. That candidate standing for student trustee was Abs. The next candidate to speak is James. James, you have 2 minutes. I will start when you introduce yourself.
James Meadway, student at SOAS and currently a student trustee at ULU. I'm standing for this for really two reasons. The first one is that I just think, and I hope everyone here would agree with this, I just think unions matter. I think it's important that unions exist. I think people need a collective voice in the society that we live in. And I think student unions matter, particularly at a time like this, when higher education, like every other bit of the education system, will be facing and is facing massive challenges over the next few years or so. Now, I've been proud, actually, to be part of what SOAS has done and what other London students have done in campaigning over the last year to try and respond to the Brown Review, to the cuts and to the various threats that are being made to the education system. I'm proud to have been part of that, and I'm very glad that as a ULU trustee I was able to support the work of the sabbatical officers in building that campaign. But this is the second reason I'm standing. I think it's important to understand what a trustee is and what it is not. What a trustee is, and this is central to it, is there to provide oversight and guidance. I think unions are important, I think everyone here thinks unions are important, but they can only function effectively if they have a sound financial and legal basis. That is what a trustee does. The sabbatical team and the Senate is there to set the political direction. They decide on campaigns, they make the big public speeches, they go out there and they do the business for the students. You as a trustee have to support that. And I'll say now that I'm committed to working with whatever sabbatical team is elected next year to make sure that ULU can build on the real successes this year. The successes of turning ULU from being just a gym and into a relevant campaigning union for students. But as a trustee of this union, it is important that you act in a supporting role. And I think my experience this year bears this out. I've sat on the appointments committee, overseeing the appointments of external trustees. I've overseen the budgets. I've made sure that the trustee board functions as a collective whole, able to support the sabbatical officers in their various functions throughout the rest of society. I'm glad to have done that. I want to build on that experience. I'm hoping you're going to vote for me for the next year. Thank you.
Our candidate for student trustee was James. The final candidate to speak to you, but by no means the least, is Ian Drummond. Ian, you've got 2 minutes once you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Ian Drummond. I'm currently a student at Birkbeck and a member of the council and an elect member of Birkbeck Executive for the next academic year. I'm standing for student trustee at ULU for 2 reasons. One is not at all different, not at all completely different from some of what other people have said. I'm a campaigner, and I don't want to use the office, as can be done by some people, to hold up campaigns, at the same time as understanding it's a different office from being the person on the podium making the speeches. And I'm in favour of oversight of ULU. I think that my unique selling point is that I personally understand from experience where there have been failings in the past that I'd like to rectify. And last year I was elected Vice President. 5 months later, after an investigation that never investigated the key facts, that was changed. Whatever the rights and wrongs of the case, this was a failure of governance, and I stand for the investigation of allegations when they're made and when they're believed by some, and I stand for accountability, and I stand for having an honest union that has that kind of oversight, and to make sure that what happened to me never happens again. But I'm more importantly standing to be a campaigner. I'll still be a campaigner, but in my role as a trustee, what I'll be doing is making sure that there's honesty at ULU, that there's accountability at ULU, and I won't be using it as an excuse to find creative reasons to stamp on campaigns that have actually made ULU much more relevant this year than it has been previously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That candidate was Ian Drummond, standing for student trustee. The other candidates who you are not going to hear from today are Chris Miller, Daniel Valentine and Hannah Kelly. Chris has sent his apologies. Hannah is in Paris, and we haven't been able to get hold of Daniel.
Hannah studies in Paris.
Sorry, she studies in
not
Paris.
just on holiday. Yeah.
She's at the University of London Institute in Paris.
Paris.
Yeah. So it's not in the journey to Paris. Okay, we now move to questions. I think we will ask all the candidates to come to the front. We will do a round of, as we've got 4 candidates here, 1 round of 4 questions And let's start with one question there, second question there, third question over in the corner, Yushini from the school photo. Is there a fourth question? No, fine, okay.
Obviously, as a trustee, you have lots of legal responsibilities, but how do you see the relationship of the trustee board, and particularly the student and external trustees, with the Senate, and what do you understand of the role of the Senate and your role in relation to that?
Okay, we'll start answering these questions. Ian, you gave your speech last, so you answer first.
Well, I don't believe that the external trustees should be able to overturn the Senate and impose their will in quite so forthcoming a way as they have perhaps in the past. I think that we should have external trustees like we have elected student trustees as a check and a balance, but that doesn't mean that they can get to make executive decisions on who gets posts, on what policies get followed. They're there to make sure that if something goes wrong, it gets investigated, not to, on the basis of not investigating in some cases, make sure that things become much more complicated and impose their will in a political almost way.
James.
Well, I'll give the answer that I gave when I stood originally for election back in October, because I think experience bears it out, which is that I compared it then, the relationship is that between a minister and his or her civil servants, that it is the role of Senate and the sabbatical officers to provide the political lead, and it is the role of the trustee board to oversee that, to make sure that what they're doing is legally and financially secure. It is not the job of the trustee board to sort of step into that process and set its own political lead. I know exactly what it's like working with people who sometimes you wouldn't actually agree with entirely. I did spend a period of time working in the civil service. I was in the Treasury under Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, neither of whom I agree with any number of issues. So I'm well aware what it's like to try and offer impartial advice and to have an oversight and governance sort of function and to try and carry out political decisions made elsewhere. So as I said, I'm committed to working with whoever gets elected for this sabbatical team, because I think it's important we have a trustee board that's able to fulfil that oversight function effectively.
Thank you. Alps.
Thank you, Sean, for your question. It's true that the political guidance is set by the sabbaticals, whoever is elected, but let's get it clear that it is students who vote for the trustees as well, and they do not vote for financial or legal advisors who attend to 4 or 5 meetings. They vote for people who are there to represent them. So no, student trustees will not set the political guidance, but they'll be there to support ULU, the union, with the sabbaticals in any issues representing students.
Thank you. And Ross.
Well, in terms of external trustees, I covered this a little bit in my first speech. I believe ULU should be run for students and by students. External trustees exist, but I'll be a strong voice there to make sure that they're not blocking measures simply because they don't like them politically. As has been mentioned, we're not a political body, we just exist for oversight, and a student voice on that is incredibly important. In terms of the Senate, I don't have too much more to add. That is the political body, that sets the political agenda, that holds the sabbaticals of ULU directly to account sort of politically. And we as a trustee board are there to offer legal and financial oversight to what they do and make sure they don't step outside certain boundaries.
That was the first question. The second question.
How to phrase this? Obviously, everyone's talking about cuts. If ULU was to face cuts, or when, should I say, how would you prioritise what it is that needs to be cut or adjusted or
Okay,
whatever?
thank you. The order of answering is James, then Abs, then Ross, then Ian. James.
So that's a good question, and I think a difficult one. It's quite easy to say at this point, well, we just decide, we just allow whatever the sabbatical officers and Senate decide on. But I do think there's something to add to that, which is that actually there are a number of courses of action that any public body can take when confronted with someone else saying your budget's being cut. There are a number of different courses of action they can take. around the country at the moment, there are local councils where councillors are saying, we don't have any choice but to implement these cuts, and lots of people are saying to them, well, you don't actually have to implement them. You could set an alternative budget, you can refuse to implement them, you can stand down. Now, I think it's quite important that when we're facing a period of severe financial hardship and challenges like we are over the next period, that actually the trustee board does act as a support for the decisions taken by sabbatical officers and by the Senate. So if sabbatical officers choose to fight the cuts at ULU, I would personally argue on the trustee board that it's our role to defend that decision and not to try and undermine it later. I think that's particularly important in relation to external trustees. Now, I know there are legal and financial difficulties associated with this. I know there are lots of challenges that saying you're going to do this can raise, but I think as a trustee board, if you're going to speak honestly about what you're doing there, you support the sabbatical officers, you support the decisions made by the political leadership inside ULU. That's what you do if you're acting honestly.
I think that links as well with the first question that was made. And the sabbaticals are there to form the political guidance, but students are there to represent. They have to see that whatever political guidance is being taken and chosen upon is done under a financial and legal review and done in the most effective manner. Cuts will undoubtedly be the most effective campaign we'll be running, we'll be dealing with this year, and we have to, as a trustee board, be able to cohesively manage and run campaigns and represent students all together.
Thank you. Ross?
Well, ultimately, yeah, the trustee board is a support network, and it depends what sabbatical manifesto students vote for this year. It's impossible in advance to determine certain priorities. The cuts are going to be here rather than there, because the priorities will come from whatever SABs are voted for. And we will support sabbatical officers in whatever decisions they make. If they come to us and say, we want to make cuts here to even out the budget, then fine. If they say, well, we want to try and set a needs budget and not implement these cuts, well, I think it's the responsibility of the trustees to support them if that's what the SABs be voted in on the basis of.
Yeah, I agree with much of what's been said, that the sabbaticals are the people who make the final decision on this, and that the trustees are there as a support network. If there's a sabbatical elected who runs a campaign against these cuts to ULU, we can get involved in that as well. And I think that we should not be there, as I said, to try and stamp down and find ways to close down this fight back. We should be the voice of students. I think that in terms of cuts to ULU, perhaps some things might be more important to some people, but in a way that's not our business as trustees. My personal preference would be to keep standing up for students, keep being a fighting voice, and actually bring in more revenue by making ULU relevant. But as a trustee, I can't do that on my own. I'd have to support what the sabbatical officers do and make sure that it's being done in a proper way.
Okay, thank you. Third question.
I think there would be almost no point in the existence of the Board of Trustees if the elected student trustees, in fact, would just go along and support the sabbaticals, even if it was against financial regulations or it would be illegal whatsoever. Every one of you is saying that no matter what, I'm going to support what the sabbaticals are elected on. But at the end of the day, you are elected just as well. Students vote for you. So would you not want to voice your own position rather than just going along with what the sabbaticals do?
Thank you for that, Abs. Then Ross.
That was an interesting point made, and yes, we are there to represent students, but we have also been represented to oversee the financial and legal aspects of anything that's undertaken. So yes, we will support the financial, but under strict rules, and if it's done under an effective and financially and legal liable manner, then we are there to speak for students, but not so to run ULU into dung drain or anything of that kind.
Thank you. Ross.
Yeah, I mean, possibly we haven't been clear enough on the actual role of the trustee board. I mean, I did say in my speech that I did not say that I would go along with sabbaticals, whatever they did. The trustee board is there to set certain boundaries, The sabbaticals may try to do something that is against the law, and it's up to the trustees to have a strong voice to say, we're stopping you doing this. But if sabbaticals are elected on a certain political programme, then they need to be supported by the trustees. We are not here for our politics. We are here because we are responsible and we can offer legal and financial oversight. If there's a specific political question that has been specifically mentioned in the Sabbaticals Manifesto that they are voted on, it's our responsibility as representatives to stand by them, because that is what the University of London students have chosen to vote for.
I have my views. I have my views on many things, but my views on being a trustee, which I set out in my manifesto, and which if I win I'll be elected on, are to take a back seat when it comes to making executive political decisions, which are not only best left to the sabbaticals, but which are constitutionally left to them. My role is to ensure fairness under the Education Act, to make sure that there's honesty, that there's openness, that when something is alleged by a number of people, that it's investigated and that the correct conclusion is come to. And that is the role of the trustee in terms of oversight, in terms of making sure that things are investigated and the fair decision is reached, rather than saying, I don't agree with somebody's politics, so I'm going to try and find a way to stop them from doing it, even though they were elected on a different political manifesto. So that's my manifesto for trustee. It's not my manifesto for SAM. I'm not standing for that, and I think that we have to differentiate between the different roles. And if the SAMs are elected on their manifesto, they should be allowed to get on with it. And if we are elected on a manifesto of letting them get on with it, then even more so, they should be allowed to get on with it.
James.
The constitutional position, at least as I understand it, and as I thought you understood it, Victoria, is pretty clear that you're there as a trustee board to support the political leadership inside ULU. It doesn't matter if you have some disagreements with what they're doing at some point in the future and you think what they're doing is absolutely terrible and they're driving ULU into the ground and we're all facing rack and ruin. You should step in as a member of the trustee board if you have financial and legal concerns about their activities. You don't spend your time afterwards saying that, well, I disagree with this or that decision taken by this or that sabbatical officer. I think that's actually really important. Now, what's happened over this year is that we've had a trustee board that, one way or the other, I think has functioned quite well because we've had a balance of opinions of it, one way or the other. We've had some good open discussions about what ULU's doing, and I think we've come to the very reasonable set of decisions that it is not the role of the trustee board to interfere with what sabbatical officers are doing in their role as campaigners, in their role as student leaders. We shouldn't be doing that. So what I might think on my own campus and what I get involved with on my own campus is one thing entirely. But what I do as a trustee is actually an important oversight role, and it is not the place to start trying to politicise that.
Is there a final question, a new question?
Sorry, can I just clarify what I asked?
Let me just find out whether there's a fourth question first. There isn't, okay.
Sorry, I specifically asked, would you support the sabbatical even if the sabbatical was to go against the financial regulations or was to carry something illegal? I completely understand, obviously there's a separation between Senate and the Board of Trustees. So I would not ask whether you would want to support or not to support the sabbatical in terms of political things. So thanks, James, for the clarification, but that's actually what I asked.
Right, okay. The supplementary candidates?
Well, all right. The short answer. Shall I start? We'll go in reverse order. The short answer is you're a trustee of a charitable institution. You can't go and support things illegal in that role. You can't. You just can't do it. So, you know, as far as that gives you an answer, that gives you an answer. As a trustee, you can't support illegal activities by ULU officers and ULU sabbatical people acting in that capacity. It just, you know, you can't do it.
Yeah, I'm standing as an openness candidate, an anti-corruption candidate. I'm not standing in favour of illegality. In terms of the wider question that I think you did ask, I refer you to my previous answer.
Yeah, I think just to clarify that, we are standing as trustees to make ULU more prosperous, and no, we would never, under any political guidance or any other biasness, support anything illegal.
Ross?
I can only reiterate what I've already said. We are there to provide legal and financial oversight. You know, that is the job of saying we're not going to support stuff illegal. You have to stop people doing something illegal. That's the job of a trustee.
Thank you. That concludes our session for student trustee.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
I've just got a couple of announcements, if I can, to the camera mate. Just to remind you that the candidates standing for student trustee, not all of whom are here, are Ross Spear, Abs, who's here, Chris Miller, who sent his apologies, James, Daniel Valentine, who's not able to speak to you today, Ian Drummond, and Hannah Kelly, who is in Paris at the University of London Institute in Paris, because that's where she studies and couldn't make it to London today. You should have received by now, or will within the next 24 hours, your password to vote. If you don't, or you find that some of your friends, family, colleagues, etc., general ULU voters haven't, please do get in contact with us at elect2011 at ulu.long.ac.uk. Details on the voting website. Voting opens tomorrow. That's it. Thank you very much for turning up. Thank you to candidates. Thank you to